and welcome to Dan's 3CH3 Slidecast video. Today I'll be taking you through the eruption of Mount Tambora and its overall effect on the world. I will be looking at it from four perspectives: environmentally, mortality, economically, and culturally. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hear about Mount Tambora, the explosion that changed the world. To begin, Mount Tambora is the largest eruption in human history. The Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI, ranks the power of volcanic eruptions. The index goes from 0 to 8. Mount Tambora is considered a VEI 7 event. To put this in perspective, the power of this eruption is equivalent to 2.2 million atomic bombs. Probably the biggest category Mount Tambora had an impact on was the environment. The environmental impact was felt worldwide and has since been the topic of many research articles and studies. We will now jump into just what kind of impact this eruption had on the Earth. The biggest environmental impact came from aerosols. When Mount Tambora erupted, it released tons and tons of ash into the atmosphere. A byproduct of this ash is sulfur dioxide. When sulfur dioxide is oxidized in the atmosphere, it becomes sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid will then condense in the atmosphere and turn into aerosols. These aerosols will travel around the atmosphere, thickening it. Because of this increase in the thickness of the atmosphere from these aerosols, the less sunlight is able to reach the surface of the Earth. This effectively cools down the Earth by blocking part of the sun. After the Mount Tambora eruption, global temperatures dropped by an average of about half a degree Celsius. That change may not seem like a lot, but it has a profound impact on the growing abilities of crops. Because these crops did not receive the necessary sunlight, they began to grow at a slower rate. Because of this slowed down rate, they were not ready to be harvested until after the normal season. This exposed the crops to pests and bugs that they were not genetically equipped to combat, causing widespread crop shortages. Another environmental impact that Tambora had was the infamous year without a summer. One of the most well-known anomalies of this year without summer is snow in June. On June 6, 1816, New York City was hit with about a foot of snow. This is not an isolated incident either. Almost all of New England was hit by a big snowstorm that summer. Next, we'll be discussing the loss of life that is connected to the Mount Tambora eruption. Overall, the number of direct and indirect victims of Mount Tambora range anywhere from 71,000 to over 100,000. Some events that led to this large number of deaths include the immediate blasts, famine, cholera, tsunamis, and more. The immediate blast zone of Mount Tambora killed up to 10,000 people from pyroclastic flows. The eruption sent ash flying over 1,300 kilometers away and was almost heard over 2,600 kilometers away. The people of Tambora were all almost instantly killed. Most victims were actually frozen in time due to the pyroclastic flow, which carbonized most of the bodies. The next major cause of death from Mount Tambora was due to famine. Because of the crop shortage discussed earlier, there was widespread famine. On the island of Samwaha, it was estimated that over 40,000 people died directly due to starvation. Another result of this famine was that children born in Switzerland from the years 1800 to 1809 were significantly shorter due to the lack of nutrition, which stunted their growth. Finally, the first major worldwide pandemic can be attributed to Mount Tamboran cholera. Cholera is a disease that attacks the small intestine, resulting in vomiting, diarrhea, cramps, and dehydration. The environment that Mount Tambora left behind was seen as prosperous for the spread of cholera. Because of the lack of knowledge on the disease, people would move to cities to receive better treatment, but this only increased the spread of cholera. Next, we'll talk about how Mount Tambora affected the economy. As you can imagine, Mount Tambora did not create an environment for economic prosperity. The main culprit of this economic recession was climate change, which caused worldwide food shortages. These food shortages resulted in hyperinflation in some countries. In Switzerland, the purchasing power of consumers dropped to the point where they could barely afford food. Throughout Europe, people were reduced to buying hunger bread, which is basically anything close to being edible mixed with flour. To add insult to injury, these hunger breads were extremely high priced and practically inedible. Another economic oddity relating to Mount Tambora is the formation of one of the biggest drug growing areas on Earth, known as the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle is located in the countries of Burma, Laos, and Thailand. Because of the poor growing seasons, Asian farmers decided to plant opium instead of their normal crop because it created a higher yield and could be sold quickly as a cash crop. Finally, the massive food shortages resulted in widespread emigration. Most immigrants moved from countries in Europe to either America or Russia. Many immigrants did not make it to their final destination during emigration because they could no longer support themselves and were forced to return home, or they died due to starvation or disease on the way. Finally, we will talk about the cultural impact Mount Tambora had on Earth. It goes without saying that there is a silver lining in everything. Well, the technological and cultural advancements that resulted from the year without summer can be seen as Mount Tambora's silver lining. To begin, without Mount Tambora, we were not on the bicycle today. During the year without a summer, people lacked an efficient mode of transportation because they were either forced to eat their horses or let them die because they could not afford to feed them. As a response to this, Carl Dreas invented the precursor to the bicycle, the walking machine, as seen above. The walking machine topped out at about 5 miles an hour. Another cultural result of Mount Tambora is the famous poem Darkness by Lord Byron. While staying in his home in Geneva with other writers, they would pass the time by having writing contests. Lord Byron was inspired by the darkness and gloomy weather that came with the year without a summer to write his poem. This poor weather resulted in one of the most iconic poems of the 19th century. Another writer living with Lord Byron during the year without summer was Mary Shelley. During these writing contests at Lord Byron's home, Mary Shelley wrote her now very famous book Frankenstein. Shelley was inspired by the cold and dark weather in Switzerland all summer. Over the course of a few days, Shelley was inspired enough to write one of the most iconic literary endeavors of all time. In conclusion, when reflecting on the eruption of Mount Tambora, it is impossible to argue that our lives would not be the same today without this massive eruption. One single event impacted such a wide breadth of topics, including poetry, transportation, cultural diversity, drugs, and many much smaller things that we probably don't even give a second thought to in our daily lives. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for listening, and if you are interested in learning more about the eruption of Mount Tambora, you can visit my blog at dans3ch3blog.wordpress.com.